Sustainable You is a casual, interactive, yet informative series detailing and cataloging the sustainability experience. Moreover, this is a short podcast docuseries detailing the thoughts and experiences of passionate advocates towards all things eco-friendly. Our journey is to know how and why understanding sustainable development towards the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet can contribute to a more mindful, holistic, and inclusive world. Specifically, this podcast showcases what makes you a changemaker, innovator, and transformer as you tackle sustainability challenges for current and future generations to resolve the so-called wicked problems. So today, we are all about championing youth activism towards climate action, especially in an international or global context, from Sweden to South Korea and Canada. I had a dialogue with a Swedish academic and post-doctoral researcher from Lund University, Hyun Kang, whose specialty is environmental politics. Currently, she is conducting a study on the governance of biodiversity and the global climate, paying close attention to institutional reactions and interactions. Her areas of interest are international relations, development on climate change and biodiversity, policy process analysis, and the decision-making processes of environmental politics with an emphasis on climate change and biodiversity. Her job experiences in research, international development, and journalism have shaped her interests. For today's episode, I learned more about how the upcoming generation of young people all across the globe is being mobilized and influenced towards organizing strikes and engaging in policy advocacy. So stay tuned and enjoy. Would you actually be able to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do? You can just give us a quick intro. That would be cool.
My name is Hyun Kang, and I'm a researcher currently working at Lund University in Sweden. I'm a political scientist. My main research interest is around environmental politics, how civil society participates in environmental politics, including young people. But also I am recently investigating about how technologies like AI are discussed in environmental politics, how they are related to how they influence these technologies, how they influence and being influenced by environmental discussion. I'm originally from South Korea, but I have been in Europe for more than 10 years, about 10 years now. I did my PhD in Germany, my first postdoc in Brussels, Belgium, and now in Sweden. And I have actually also a journalist background. Back in Korea, I used to be a journalist for an online paper.
So usually what we get people to do is we play a quick icebreaker. Basically, I'm going to send you like a list of words, just your email, and then you're just going to pick one that describes your persona, your nature in regards to your career as a researcher. And it's not to like typecast you or anything into like a personality type A.
I kind of relate myself to the word calm.
Okay.
Calm.
Okay, and why did you pick that word?
Because it's not because I'm always calm, but I always try to be calm because anxiety doesn't really help with anything. And then when you are in a calm mood and then you think through whether it can be your personal matters or my research questions, I think it's always helpful to stay calm or try to have that kind of status. So that is maybe my goal of my personality.
No, I like that, calm. Especially to be an academic researcher, you need to be calm. Like I just went through the thesis writing process and you have to be so calm to do it. Because originally I wanted to go for my doctorate and then I'm like, but I was going to ask you about that too, how you found it. But yeah, you need to be calm if you want to be a researcher, especially in like climate action and those kinds of initiatives. I think that's a good.
But I mean, you have to also be excited about the topic and enthusiastic. So I don't deny those, enthusiasm, but also when you want to think through, I think this calm part important. Yeah, you don't have to be always calm, I would say.
Okay. So what makes you uncertain and what makes you curious?
Curious, so maybe I will go first with curiosity. I feel curious when I, let's say, okay, when I learn a new language and when I encounter new words, and then I become curious. I have been in different countries in the last 10, 15 years, and then I have learned maybe 5, 6 languages, and then whenever I learn a new one, there are a new word opens in front of me, and then I become quite curious how people express the same sentence in different ways, in different culture and countries. I think language, I'm curious about languages. Uncertain, maybe I'm uncertain about my future. I'm currently working as a postdoc, a researcher, and it's with a temporary contract. So I still need to find the next step. Yeah, whenever I think about my future, I feel this uncertainty.
No, I like your response, and I like how you mentioned languages because it's so difficult and impressive that you learned a handful because I can only speak a couple, and seeing how Swedish was so difficult to pick up on. Like everyone's like, oh, it'll be easy because you speak French in Canada. I'm like, we don't all speak French. Not really. That's not where I live. They don't, not in Western Canada. It's not mandatory in schools, but it's difficult to pick up Swedish, even though some words were similar. Like I think I only learned how to say hudemar, taxamik, like just when I'm like, no, I think I'll stick to English. It's much easier. But yeah, no, it's impressive that you can do that, and no, it's great.
Yeah, I'm not mastering all the language.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I've never been to South Korea, but I'd love to see that perspective. But it's interesting that you have like both perspectives and backgrounds, and you've been living in Sweden for a while now, so that's really cool. And do you want to tell me more about you and yourself? So your struggles, your aspirations, and your contributions, I guess, that led you to get involved in this sort of research. So especially towards, I guess, climate action. It doesn't necessarily have to be towards youth activism, but it seems you're kind of in that area, I guess, of climate change adaptation. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I got interested in environmental issues when I was, when I was working as a journalist, and that I was covering various topics. It was a small newspaper company, online newspaper company, and then everybody had to cover different issues. So for me, that included like education, environmental movement, and civil society. And maybe that, experience influenced me a lot. I learned a lot about how climate is changing already at the time, some years ago. And then I also interviewed many social activists in Korea, including environmental NGOs and also youth activists at the time. And I think, that really motivated me to learn more about environmental politics. So that's why I quit my job, and then I did my master's degree in climate change and development. And then I really got committed myself in environmental policy and politics issues. And then, my project on youth participation was actually my first postdoc project. I was not leading a project. I was a principal investigator, and I was the researcher within the project. But then I think I could passionately work on that topic because of my background, experience as a journalist back in Korea, and also during the research project, also interviewed more than 100 youth and non-youth participants in international environmental conferences. And then this field work experience also kind of kept me going. Because I could meet and talk directly with all these passionate young people, and then it was really inspiring experience, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Sounds you followed a similar career path to me, because I saw the way mainstream media was in Canada. I saw that when I pitched stories on like climate action or global warming, it's not something that they wanted. Like they really it was very much, because where I live in Canada, it's the oil and gas capital of Canada. So they were just happy with like hockey news or
crime that still they did not care about this other stuff, other than if it was like a wildfire and it sensationalized those headlines, and I'm like, that's the point. And it's kind of cool that you saw that as well. Maybe mainstream media in Korea wasn't really, I don't know how it is there, but
exactly. I mean, actually, my newspaper company was a kind of the opposite. It was an alternative small online newspaper company, and we had very much freedom to cover the issues we were interested in. But in general, in Korea, environmental movement is not really a hot topic back then, and still now. I mean, even we see all these environmental disasters, then it is not a major topic still. Yeah.
Interesting. No, so what would be your definition of sustainable development and sustainability?
I know the right answer to the first question, what is sustainable development, because it is written in one of the UN conference agreement back in 1987. I can't remember the exact sentence, but they defined sustainable development as the social and economic development which does not compromise the future generations' well-being and interests. So we as long as we does not harm the future and develop, for us, that means sustainable development.
Because this is known as like the standard definition. Do you agree with that definition? Do you I don't know, like in Sweden, at least what I thought was odd, because you've heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Do you find that these metrics still hold merit? Because I'll give you an example. In Canada, the very much SDGs, you go to any university campus, they literally kind of follow them. More as like goalposts, I guess. But when I was in Sweden, they don't really acknowledge them because they're like, it's not something, like it wasn't even part of the curriculum, because they said that they very much advocate for it's part of the Anthropocene, and it's not very inclusive of all flora and fauna. It's a very self-centered perspective. So it has to be a bit more ecocentric. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know how it is in Korea as well. Do they follow this SDGs? Is it something that
I think to be honest, I don't know a lot about Korean society at the moment because I left there 10 years ago. And as far as I remember, sustainable development in Korea is quite mainstreamed, I would say, because our previous president in the 2000s also there were presidents who promoted this approach, and they actually institutionalized sustainable development into governmental agencies and also for foreign aid development works. But I partly agree that approach of sustainable development is not radical enough to change our society because climate crisis is an urgent matter. Scientists say we need to stop or reduce significantly our carbon emissions by 2030 or by 2050 at the latest. And I'm not sure this concept of sustainable development would help us to reach the goal. So I think we also need more radical approach or more eco-centric approach to achieve those global goals, actually.
Okay. That's interesting that you mentioned, because I'm interested in the governance aspect too, because at least in Sweden, I noticed that they have their political parties is like a spectrum, and they had on Gotland, at least they have this democracy festival, and they have a feminist party, and they have a green party, and people take that literally. But in Canada, our green party, people don't take it seriously. In Korea, is it similar? Because I know you were there a long time ago, but do they have for the governance, I guess, aspect of it? Do they have that for political advocacy for sustainable development?
Yeah, I mean, in Korea, we also have two big parties. I don't actually know much about Canadian politics, but it's easy when you think about the US politics. the US. In Korea, we also have usually they take the turn for the government. Other parties, we have a Green Party and other minor parties, but they almost never get the chance to get over. And then I would say the Democratic Party in Korea, a little bit more progressive. They promote quite a lot of like green growth or green transition, which includes some goals of sustainable development. So they make some such approach, but I would say it's not very radical.
No, it's
different from Green Party. Yeah.
Okay, no, it's interesting because I'm interested to see what perspective. I'm like, this is really cool in Canada. It's different from Sweden, and Korea obviously is different. South Korea. And okay, great. So thanks for sharing that. And what would be on this next question? What are your research's, I guess, core values and like the intention behind them? So just to read up on your background, it seems you focus a lot on environmental politics and climate change adaptation and biodiversity, especially in regards to things like public policy and international development. So I guess has this background as a researcher informed your perspective on climate activism?
Yeah, again, I think my experience as a journalist also influenced my perspective. But while studying environmental politics as my research subject, I would say that, I could have more like a balanced perspective on all different social issues, including environmental movements. So with them, like Korean activists on cultural. Oh, all right. So I was very close to the activist community, let's say. But then, since I started to write my thesis and other papers about activism and other issues, I also found different perspectives on activism and their arguments. So I became a little bit more balanced, maybe a little bit more critical sometimes about activism. And so I'm not sure if it's a good direction or not. But that has been the change. Yeah.
I think that it's interesting that your transition from being a reporter and journalist to going into research, because I've also gone on that path. And for me, I'd see a lot of civil activism in the city, especially during like COVID and the lockdown. It was pretty intense. But then I learned like in the US and Canada in general, it was pretty strict. But when you go to Sweden, they're like, no, we didn't have any lockdown. We were very lax. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. But when I saw during that lockdowns, people like it's just civil unrest, and every Sunday we'd have protests from like refugees from Ukraine, Iran and stuff like that. But then we'd also have a lot of like climate action, like advocacy. And I remember covering things like Extinction Rebellion. I don't know if that's a thing in Sweden or Korea, but that was big. And Fridays for Future. So all of a sudden all these advocates came out of nowhere. So I think that actually makes you stronger in that sense, because you've seen like the practical application side of things, like how it affects people socially. And I think as like researchers, you tend to live in a bubble. At least that's what I thought when I was at like Campus Scotland. I'm like, no, this is like affecting real people. Like this affects, Indigenous people. These like, it's all connected. You have all these stakeholders, but a lot of them didn't see that because they just they're super focused on, I guess, their intentions were just focused on like the research maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I also observed the same thing when I was a journalist. When I was communicating with researchers, I thought, they had their own bubbles, and now I'm in the bubble by myself. And then I could also feel, there is this tendency to focus on our own research because, sometimes you have to do for the next job or opportunities. And also it makes many researchers distant from reality. So I think that is why it is actually important for me to keep my contact with the activists or the interviewees for my research, like by meeting them or interviewing them, talking with them. It is really important to put my foot on the ground and keep my research not in the sky.
True. No, it's great to hear your perspective as like a former reporter myself. Okay, great. And now to actually go on to more related to topic of climate action activism. So my question is, what sparked your interest in climate action towards youth activism? So yeah, I'm curious about that. And like, what role do you believe younger persons have in addressing the climate change crisis?
I always think young people's participation is really critical for climate policy because they are those who will live the consequences of a changing climate. So they are the people who have to voice up for their own life and for their own future and their own children and grandchildren. So I think, if they don't speak up, I think the older generation will easily take the reality for granted and take everything business as usual because they live shorter life, literally. So it is always important that to show that there are people who will get affected by this irresponsible action. And also, I also met many young people who have really brilliant ideas and they have very clear position about what we have to do. I believe, I hope they will become the leaders in their societies and they will really make changes in environment politics. Yeah, so participation of young people will also, I think, change politics itself because, and also it is helpful for, I don't want to say future leaders, future politics, make it more, environmental friendly, I would say.
Yeah, I like that response. It's good to hear that, like, you kind of used your journalistic background and you kind of got that experience on the ground talking to younger people and then it inspired you to do that research study. I think it's great you've stuck it out in that area because I think it's really needed. And even in Canada, we have our federal elections coming up this month and it's like a snap election. So it's curious to see how this next generation is going to be voting. And I tend to notice like Gen Z, like, you know, like up and coming and even after that, it's they're more into like climate action and things like mental health and gender equality and stuff like that. So I think it's all like there's just something, it's exciting to see. Okay, so how do you define environmental justice? So how does it relate to climate action and activism from your perspective?
Yep. So I thought about it and I think that there are several layers to talk about environmental justice. And I think the basic point is, for me, environmental justice means to follow the polluters pay principle. So those who are more responsible have to take more responsibility about solving the issues. So for example, the global north countries, Canada, Western Europe, also these days Korea as well. They have to take more responsibility than the global south who are less responsible. And the rich people who emit more carbon by taking more flights and taking more luxury lives, they should be more responsible than those living in the poverty. Also those who have already contributed to the environmental deterioration. Older generation has to take more responsibility than younger generation. So I think here this intergenerational justice or intergenerational environmental justice comes in the play. So I think basically I would say polluter pay principle explains a lot about environmental justice.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to hear your perspective on that. And I guess, again, from your perspective as a researcher, what does climate activism include, including advocacy groups? So, again, the resistance that we're looking at. So, everything from protest, strikes, and other forms of direct action. So, what does it look like from the Swedish perspective? Because I'm curious, because you're originally from Korea, so you've seen it there, and then you've seen it in the Swedish, I guess, perspective too. Do you want to talk more about that?
So the question is the Swedish perspective. Yes, I think, it's a mixture, to be honest. But then I could also see in general in Europe. So this environmental movement led by youth was a huge thing. Like 5 years ago, when Greta Thunberg, got spotlight, and then with her, this Fridays for Future movement started first in Sweden, and also it spread out to Europe, Asia, and all other countries. I think they got really excited about this new movement. But then we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and now it's been more than 5-6 years, and I could see that this perspective on youth movement or even environmental movement has slightly changed. Also with this geopolitical situation, the war between Russia and Ukraine, and that dominates media and people's concern. So I think there is a little bit less interest in environmental movements at the moment, but it doesn't mean that they don't care about the environment, but their primary concern has shifted from environmental matters to geopolitical matters, I would say. Also, there was this governmental change in Sweden, so they put less investment or less budget into developmental aid. Instead, they are now investing more in security and defense matters. So that also maybe affected people's perspective.
Interesting. And do you want to speak more about, I guess, even the Korean perspective? Like, do you have, like, those kind of climate activists like Greta in Korea? Because mainstream media is very much westernized, and we only kind of see that perspective, at least in Canada. Do you want to share more about that?
Sure. Yeah, in Korea, I think the media also got interest in youth movement, and actually in Korea also, young people inspired by Greta started Fridays for Future in Korea. So there was a big youth-led climate protest in Korea. Not every Fridays, like twice a year, they organize big protests in Seoul, and these events were reported by some media. Although they never got the most attention, these were kind of sidelined. But I would say those who are engaging in environmental movement in Korea, they are really committed. And I also interviewed those young people, and I could see that they are really serious about this topic and very concerned about their future. But then at the same time, they also experience, there is in Korean society, there is a generation or age discrimination. When you are younger in the society, your opinions are not yet respected. And then they also face this challenge, not just about people's ignorance about climate issues, but also as youth activists, they got into this wall of age discrimination. So they also wanted to advocate for more youth rights. So they started to engage in youth movement in general.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it's the opposite, because they don't have that ageist thing here in Canada. I think she was 16 when she had marched out. I think so. But it's definitely different to see the cultural aspects of it. Because even though I'm originally from Canada, my parents are from India, and I've seen how it's similar in India too. It's not there. You have to. There's like the cultural aspect where you have to kind of social and cultural where you have to respect your elders and their opinion holds more weight than I guess youth activists or youth do. So it's definitely interesting to hear your perspective on that. So you already spoke a little bit about it, but what would be your, I guess, point of view on citizen activism and environmental activism towards concepts like just sustainabilities? So I can just kind of read out the definition. So here it is from the founding father of environmental justice, Lean Eggman. I'm sure you've heard of him. He lives in the US. So sustainability cannot simply be a green or environmental concern. Important though environmental aspects of sustainability are, a truly sustainable society is one where wider questions of social needs and welfare and economic opportunity are integrally related to environmental limits imposed by supporting ecosystems. So again, it's talking about the social aspect and the economic, and that's what sustainable development is about. I think at least I noticed we don't see that as much, especially mainstream media. It's very much just focused on the environmental aspect of it. And I noticed that in Canada too, especially with things like BIPOC and stuff coming out here in Canada and the US, like Black, Indigenous people of color, and to include, marginalized perspective. So do you want to talk more? Do you have any thoughts on that, like environmental activism and what it means for, on that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I totally agree that environmental justice is also about social justice, because when you think about like who pays and who gets the consequences, that's always related to the social hierarchy and the societal system. In the US, where when the environmental movement started, it was actually led by those who had to live in the areas, polluted areas, because of these dumped polluted materials, and those who couldn't afford to move out from these areas. I think that's where environmental movement started in the first place. So I think we can't really separate environmental issues from other social justice issues. So I totally agree with this opinion. Yeah, I think I wanted to say something grand.
No, it's good that you at least acknowledge environmental justice and justice. And it does relate, like you said, because it emerged from like those against marginalized and underrepresented communities in the U.S. and especially African American communities, and how they just all the pollution was being dumped on them. And you actually see this not just in the U.S., in Canada as well, where you see a lot of the bigger cities, like the capitals, I guess, that's their disproportionately, it's the people of color who have to live in those more impoverished areas of the city, and they get the less shrubbery and the greenery, and it's not like the urban design isn't as nice. So I think it's a very interesting concept. I imagine in Sweden, at least in Stockholm, I kind of got the impression just walking around, it's a little bit like that. Not maybe entirely like how it is here, but it's definitely interesting to hear your perspective on it. So thanks for sharing. So what skills are the most important for being, I guess, a change maker or leader in this field that you're researching? So what strategies do you find the most effective for raising awareness about climate change?
I think there is no one strategy to become more effective and influential in environmental politics, to be honest. I think everybody has something to contribute if they are interested in environmental issues, and if they are committed to those issues. I think they can do with their own capital. It can be social capital, it can be other skills they have. I think there is no one way to become an influential person. And also, while studying about youth movement, I also read that social movement is basically constructed through social networks. So people get influenced most by their friends and family. When somebody who try to change their lifestyle or try to engage in movements, people get inspired the most by the action from your friend or family. So although we also saw how Greta also has influenced global environmental politics, some young people indeed got inspiration from Greta, but what moves is their friends and family and relatives and colleagues. So if you show your commitment and enthusiasm about environmental issues, and if your people around you could see it, I think that is actually, it could be slow, but I think it could be the most effective way. Changing by showing and doing your own action. I think it is the way to go, in my opinion.
No, I agree. Like social influence is so key to motivating others to genuinely want to participate. So I think that's great, and especially how youth these days use social media to their advantage, to get people to take on these like sustainable challenges. Like you mentioned, it's really great to hear that. And just on this, and I think, I don't know if the article had mentioned this, like the conversation article I mentioned, but the question asks, so, and I'm curious about this too, why are like Scandinavian countries such as Sweden, why are they notoriously known for a disproportionately larger number of climate change activists? And again, I mentioned the climate policy framework, the emission reduction targets, because we have that in Canada too, like for each province and the country as a whole. But I get like time and time, I always see this part of the world rated as just being more progressive towards these policies. So why is that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I can explain a little bit in the German context because that's what I studied. I haven't really studied. Yeah. Germany is also well known for their environmental movement, especially in these days. I think it is partly from their history since the even before. So, I would say there are several factors behind. First, I think there was this idealization or romanticism about nature in Germany since I can't remember, like the 17th or 18th century. People got this idea like nature is beautiful. I mean, before then, nature was more like something we have to fight with to survive. Yeah. You know, nature can harm us, like nature can threaten us. But then with like artists and philosophers, nature became more like idealistic place to live in, and also they romanticized natural beauty in nature. So I think that kind of influenced maybe German or Northern European culture in the last 100 of years. And also there were in Germany, in modern society, they have had a very big green movement against nuclear power in the 60s. And also it led to the establishment of a Green Party in Germany and also in other European countries. So these Green parties, I think, influenced political dimension a lot. So I think there is also this political system which enables these minor new parties became more powerful over time. I mean, they also have like major parties, but then the German system is represented. I can't remember the English name very well about this word, but yeah. German citizens vote not only for people, but also for parties. So even you can separate these two votes. So they can also vote for Green parties while they are supporting people from other parties. So in that way, Green Party got more power, or they got more seats in the parliament, and then they could also influence their environmental politics. So I would say this political system and also the cultural background have influenced a lot on European environmental politics. And then speaking of European politics, they also have the European Union, which has some legal power on environmental matters. So Sweden is also a member of the European Union. I think somehow they also have to follow this. Yeah, although you can't really explain why people are more interested in environmental issues. You can kind of see that, there has been some political changes in their system, and it kind of led to more maybe environmental friendly policy in those countries.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's interesting how you mentioned the romanticism and now it led to like political advocacy and stuff like that. Do you know in Korea, do you also, how is it similar there? Like, is the environment, like the great outdoors, something that is more that you need to tame? Is it something that also follow that path, or is it a different perspective there? Because I'm curious to learn more about that.
I think the Korean context is quite different from Northern European context. Yeah, again, I think when we talk about environmental matters, you can't really skip the economic history. So the Korean society has experienced very rapid economic growth in the last 5 decades. So since the 1970s, the Korean economy had grown so much, so quickly. And then at that time, people didn't really care about environmental issues. But then at certain point, we had more pollution issues, and then they had also capacity to address these issues. So with the economic development. So I would say now Korea also has a well-established environmental institutions, like regulatory institutions, and also we also have environmental NGOs who fight for more environmental protection. But compared to Sweden, the general awareness about climate change or environmental issues is quite lower. Mm-hmm. People know that there is an issue, especially these days. We also get like a wildfire every spring and so on. So people know there is a serious issue, and it also affects their food price. So we now have more expensive foods and everything. So people know that there is a problem, but then I think still people prioritize economic growth. And so unless economic growth is not affected, I think people are willing to do more action on environmental issues. But I think degrowth is still a very minor issue. Yeah. Although I also translated a book about degrowth from English to Korean. So now the concept is also introduced, but it's not a popular topic.
Yeah, I had difficulty wrapping my head around that because no business school in Canada would teach that, but in Sweden, of course, they do. So I was like, it's a paradox. Like even sustainable development is a paradox in and of itself. Like how do you even do that? Balancing, economic sustainability with your, other environmental, social, and governance goals. But I think that's very interesting that you say that. But no, it's nice to hear your perspective on that. And I think hopefully people are more mobilized towards that, because at least in like you mentioned the EU, I don't know if I guess Korea or that part of the world, they have something like the EU. In Canada, we don't. And I do notice that, because the EU has very stringent rules around sustainable development, and even from the certain certifications on products like the Eco Swan label, whatnot, they're very strict. But when you look at the ones in North America, like the B Corp, it's actually greenwashing, because I had done research. I talked to people that are running like a fashion business in India, and they're using organic cotton from there. And they were saying how B Corp, they won't even acknowledge that certification because it's greenwashing, because they're still processing, using pesticides. So it's not technically fully organic. So it got very convoluted, and I'm like, oh my God, it's where do you get the proper information? And I feel and it's funny, when I talk to my classmates, the European students, the ones from the EU, were not acknowledging these North American standards because they thought they were too lax. No, you're too lax, or you can't, your certifications are not legit and stuff like that, your B Corp and stuff like that, even though that's American, it's not Canadian. But I was surprised at that. And now it's interesting too, in Canada, I feel we also are prioritizing economic sustainability. And you see that with, for example, we have the Trump tariffs, and now people are transitioning to be, buy local, buy Canada, and, don't support the American economy and stuff like that. So, the people are hopefully starting to mobilize towards things like growth and the circular economy. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how different parts of the world, from Korea to Sweden, and how they treat it. So it's definitely interesting. But does this public education system and its curriculum, do they integrate environmentalism, sustainable development principles? And in Korea, do you do that at all? Do you have a unit, a curriculum in public school where you teach these things?
I think that's not in regular curriculum, but they can choose to teach about the environment, and there are specialized organizations, NGO centers where run the programs for students. So they visit schools to teach in special sessions and so on. So I know that they have quite this kind of programs, private programs, but I'm not sure if it's included in graduation exams.
Oh yeah, no, it's understandable. It's similar to from Canada. We have in grade school, you have the curriculum in a certain grade, and they teach that unit, but it's not integrated. But then when I was talking to researchers on Australia, they actually do integrate it into those practices sustainable education into the public school curriculum. So I'm not sure, maybe I guess it depends on like what part of the world. And then I just wanted to mention the article again. So it addresses various like political campaigns that took place as part of the great like ecological turn in the 1970s, as you'd mentioned earlier and onwards. So including social democratic reform. So do you want to share more about this? Because I'm curious as to why, maybe it explains why Scandinavian countries are more feminist and like the most socially progressive. Yeah, do you want to share more about that?
Know that in Scandinavian countries and also in Germany, they have a strong tradition in their political system to integrate these socio-democratic ideas. And I think that is actually a very important factor behind their eco-friendly society, because as we have experienced during the pandemic, COVID-19, I think regulation, when people are forced to change their behavior with some kind of incentives, you can really change those regulations, like for maternity leave, or how to say, fathers also, they have to take the leave for their children, otherwise they don't get economic benefit. And that kind of forced many Swedish people to engage in childcare, like a Swedish men to engage in childcare during their leave time. And then I think that can also explain how they have to separate the garbage to sort their garbage into different and so on. So I think regulation, so you can't really explain the society just with the people's awareness. Regulation behind is also very important, that people, when they are forced to do it, and then they get used to do it. And I think that in the long term, that changes the overall awareness of the society.
Okay, no, great. Thanks for sharing. No,
This explains
perspective. So, like, I guess you talked a bit about this, but I can go into it. Why has Greta Thunberg become the face of the youth-led climate activism and climate action in general? Not just in Sweden, but around the world. So how has her voice and influence mobilized others to become advocates of climate action?
Well, I think Greta had a great passion about climate issues. I think that is the first reason we could watch her speech at the UN conference in front of other world leaders, and she had a very bold speech about urgency and the importance of climate policy. And I think many people got inspired by her movement and speech and action. But then I think there are some other reasons why she especially got more attention, because there were other young people before Greta who were also very active about, and they also voiced up on different environmental issues. But I think Greta had a more this kind of global north background, young person, white girl from Sweden, and she could speak perfect English. And I think this kind of background also gathered more attention. I mean, also many young people in Europe, in North America, I think they could kind of find similarities with Greta. And I think that also moved many young people around the world. Yeah, so also some scholars point out, what if Greta was from, let's say, South Africa, it's different ethnic background and so on. I think they could lead to different results. There was also this societal background which made her get more attention from media.
Yeah, that's actually a very valid point. I didn't really think about it that way, because the socio-political aspect of it and the demographic background. Because a lot of some youth, obviously, they come from more privilege. If you're of an immigrant background, ethnic background, or you're from the global south, you're probably not going to get as much precedent. Even though I've seen, like you mentioned, South Africa, South America, South Asia, like there's places, but it's not, it would definitely be a different, I think, trajectory in that sense. So that's actually a very valid point. And so how does ecological modernization and youth activism, especially towards human progress, play into the idea of sustainability and resolving the climate change crisis? But yeah, So that's something I'm curious about.
I mean, ecological modernization, I think it's a very good theory which motivated many policymakers actually in the past years, because that means by promoting environmental protection, you can also promote economic growth, and economic green growth is possible. It's not the whole idea, but I think that really motivated many leaders, political leaders, to take more action on climate change and energy transition and so on. But I think it should be actually balanced with this environmental justice approach. So you can't really change everything just by changing technologies and boost the economy. You always need people's participation, and you have to always think about just result from such actions like energy transition without justice. I think it will lead to a huge amount of unemployment issues, and also if you think about just green energy without thinking these consequences of material extraction in other countries, I think that will actually not solve global environmental issues in the long term. So I think we need everything actually to address climate change quickly. We also need just an equitable perspective to make it more sustainable.
No, I totally agree. That holistic perspective is needed towards strong sustainability. It's not a matter of transitioning to renewable energy and appeasing the global north and industrialized countries, and just trying to satiate their ever-growing gluttony and their the growth and all that stuff and consumerism. It's about incorporating the social aspects and, like you said, mental justice, and I find that that's not done enough. And that's a good point. And so basically, how can we mobilize those who lack a sense of agency, I guess, to adopt that ethic of care? Like, because I find that, like we were saying, it's all interconnected. Like, if people don't find that their social issues are getting solved, they won't really care about the environmental. And I do find, at least in Canada, it's not the people, like the BIPOC that I mentioned, that are advocating for environmental initiatives, because their other needs maybe are not being taken care of. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is no clear answer towards this. I think many people have tried to incorporate, or they have wanted to make a solidarity between environmental movement and other movements like poverty movements or labor movements, and some have succeeded, but not everybody, because of multiple reasons. I think there is no one way to motivate people, but I think many people they realize the urgency of change when it becomes their own issue. Yeah, it can be their job or about their family, about their health. So I think it is always good to explain and frame environmental issues, not just it's about like the North Pole. It's not like the polar bears or penguins. It is actually about our own issue. Like, I also don't like this term environmental politics, because it's not really about the environment. It is about ourselves. So I think we also need to reframe like environment issues as human issues. It's really about our survival, about your own children, about your grandchildren. So when people could relate to those environmental issues as their own issue, I think people can change their behavior. They can maybe voice up more for better environmental policy.
Okay, great. No, it's good to hear your perspective on that. So I know you said you had worked on a book regarding this. So how does this all contribute to the Degrowth Manifesto? So how do you find, I guess, people and maybe even organizations can balance sustainable goals while striving towards like economic growth? Or even you can talk about it from, I guess, the political activism perspective.
Sorry, then could you repeat the degrowth question again? Sorry about this.
No, it's okay. Well, so what are the current and potential policy interventions that can promote sustainable practices and trends towards climate activism? So how can you get people more involved in political advocacy and regulations for climate action and environmentalism?
I think it is always important to guarantee the freedom of speech and freedom of action. Otherwise, when people are afraid of taking action because of the government, there is no point to expect people will engage in environmental movements. For example, in Korea, young people couldn't join the Fridays for Future protests because they couldn't skip their school. They were told by their teachers that if you skip school, you will get some kind of punishment. You can't really join such action. So I think it's the same for many people. People have more freedom, more flexibility to do something they want. I think they will also join different kinds of social movements and also pay attention to other people and try to make solidarity with different people, different groups. So I think that is always important to have a democratic, free society. And but a more specific policy action, not sure. I think it's also important. I mean, with this development of artificial intelligence, I think more and more people will likely to subscribe their own information bubbles. And I think it is really important to somehow, guaranteeing the freedom of speech. Somehow we also need to have a good system which can disincentivize misinformation and disinformation about environmental issues and promote good information, good knowledge, good scientific knowledge. I think somehow when we educate people in a good way, I think that will also help environmental policy in long run.
Oh, it's definitely interesting to hear your perspective on Korea as well and the Swedish perspective and both. And it was definitely insightful.
Thanks so much for tuning in to yet another eye-opening episode of Sustainable You. Again, this is an extraordinary and engaging info series whose purpose is to make sustainable development and sustainability accessible to the average person in their quest to quench their knowledge on environmentalism. Be sure to leave your feedback by liking this week's released edition and by subscribing to this podcast. Again, any love from our followers is much appreciated. Signing off until next time.